I went through your story narrative. We're good to go.
Good. Yeah, we'll just make it up as we go along.
It's what we do, Mike.
Yeah.
You're looking very good. You're in a different background now. I thought you were gonna have the cameras and everything. Or did your wife finally make you clean them up?
I'm in a different studio. Anyway, it looks like we've gone live. We're running a little bit late, but it certainly looks like we're live now. Anyway, so hey there, and welcome to everyone joining us today for this special webinar, wherever you are in the world. You know, we get around the US, into Europe, and many other places as well. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Mike Graham, live here in New York City, and I'm proud to be the host of this special webinar today. Now, I came online a long time ago. I've been around for a very long time. In fact, the internet was coal powered when I first started. I go back. In fact, I started my agency 29 years ago. Imagine that. And people ask me, you know, was the internet or the World Wide Web as it is, was it actually still, had it been invented back then? And then the other one I get is people say, if you created an agency in 1995, what a visionary you must have been. And I go, what an idiot, because nobody needed an internet marketing agency back then. Anyway, I kind of struggled for a couple of years. And by around about 1998, I was doing nothing but what we call search engine optimization now, not that it had a name back then. I think probably around about 2002, that agency was acquired by another agency, a rapidly growing startup, which, if memory serves me well, was above a bank in Boston. I'll fact check that in just a minute. And the agency was acquired then, and I became a part of that team, which is how I know our guest. And then probably around about 2005, just skipping ahead, that agency was acquired for $50 million. That's how you grow an agency. And that's why we have our special guest here today. So welcome, Rob Murray. Rob, great to see you.
Mike, it is awesome to see you as well. It has been a long, long time. I will say it. I always like to kid with people. I tell them, like, I predate paid search.
Oh, yeah.
And you're one of the few that actually can predate my predating paid search.
It is. It's true, because, you know, when I first started, it was all just about email. And then around about 1998, people started getting interested in search engines. And then, of course, you know, I wrote a book which became like a really big deal, trying to explain information retrieval, how search engines work. And that's just as the industry was beginning. And like you say, when we started, there was no such thing as paid search. That eventually came. But I just gave kind of a mile-high overview of how I know you, Rob, because we've known each other for a very long time, obviously. But let's just take a step back and talk about just before you got into what we now call, you know, SEO and digital marketing. You were working with one of the larger consulting firms. I don't remember which one, but one of the larger. Had that been a plan for you? I mean, when you were a kid, did you think, when I grow up, I want to be either an astronaut, a cowboy, or a consultant?
Yeah, it was it was those three in that order. And I think I settled on strategy consultant, mainly because cowboys really didn't exist anymore. And yeah, I just never made it to the astronaut track. No, I mean, I can dial back a little bit. So I was, you know, I started my career in my early days as I've always been in the services industry. I was a CPA in my very first job out of college, and I did that for a bunch of years. And I went client side thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I could, if I do this on the client side, it'll be better and more interesting. And I found out quickly after about 5 years that that wasn't the truth. So I went back and I went to business school, and I came out of business school bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to conquer the world. And I settled on a strategy consulting job because the internet was really, it was such in its infancy. There wasn't a lot of companies that were coming into business schools to recruit people, right? It was like two guys in a coffee shop on a, you know, on a business plan on a napkin. And there was not a lot of, it was very, it was very real time. It was very fluid. And so I joined a consultancy mainly because I wanted to further my education, understanding of business practices, and how I could help sort of dig into business problems and find systems and processes on how to solve them. But I spent about 16 months there. And I quickly learned that while the partners had great lifestyles and they were able to go home at 5 o'clock at night, they would tear your deck apart at 5 o'clock at night. and, and I like that. And I'd be left to rebuild the deck until 4 in the morning, go home, shower, change, and head to the airport to go to the client to present it. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So I ended up hooking up with a gentleman named Frederick Marchini.
Yeah. So can I just stop you there for a quick second, because I've already given kind of an inclination of what the company was, but I was racking my brains earlier today. What was the name of the company that Frederick originally founded?
You don't remember? Well,
I don't.
You know what? That is the very reason we changed it because no one knew it, even no one knew it back then. It was called Response Direct.
Response Direct, of course, yeah. And no wonder I don't remember it. It's not very memorable.
People didn't know it back then. God, no, I don't expect anyone to remember it now.
And of course, then Frederick renamed the company to iProspect.
Yes.
And so that was it. That was the original search engine marketing firm.
Yep.
Which went on. So how did you meet Frederick, and then how did you join that team?
So it's interesting. So I met Frederick through the gentleman who was helping him with his accounting, who happened to be a colleague of mine, former colleague of mine, my very first job out of college. And I'd come out of business school, and I was at Bain, and Frederick had kind of stumbled across this thing. He just started helping a few companies, and the next thing you know, a couple more people started asking, and then Frederick's like, "Whoa, wait a minute! Like, I gotta hire people, and I gotta set up payroll. I gotta build a company. Or I guess he could have chosen just to be an individual, person and just continue to do the consulting. But he and I hooked up in very early 1999, and I started to work with him. I started to consult with him, and then after a couple months, it just kind of felt like he kind of looked at me. He's like, "Why are you just doing this? Like, just helping me out here? Why don't you just quit your good paying job and take a real big risk and come join me for a pay cut and the chance of something big?" And I said, "Wow, that sounds very compelling. Maybe I should do that." And I did. And history would say that my career took a very dramatic turn 25 years ago when I said when I decided to join. What was then at Response Direct. I was there when we rebranded iProspect in January of 2000. So very, very, fortuitous.
You were president of the company when my little company was acquired. Frederick and I had this great friendship, and obviously he was very keen to grow the business. Acquiring, my company back then was Mike, let's figure out a way that we can work together without being, and there he is, without being, that's an old one. Yeah, without being competitors, how can we work together? And then at the same time, he gets an opportunity to expand internationally, which kind of takes me to this point. Stepping back, there was no. You and I did an interview, I remember, a while back. In fact, the last time we did an interview was 9 years ago on the 65th floor of the Empire State Building.
I remember that.
When I was with Acronym, yeah. And so one of those things that's kind of, evergreen. You mentioned them when I was saying to you, what's the secret of starting a great business? And you said at the very beginning, find the right category. But when you think about this, when you started with, iProspect, there wasn't really a category there. There was this completely new emerging kind of industry, and it was the Wild West.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think, Mike, I think back to the times when you and I were slogging it out early days, we were creating a category. And there was a saying we like to say is that first we had to convince people they had mice in their house, and then we had to convince them that having mice in your house is a bad thing. Right? we had to convince them that not being ranked in a search engine is terrible, right? And so we had to convince them that search engines are great, and not being ranked in them is a bad thing for your business. And then once we got them through that hoop, then actually moving them through we can help you fix that problem, became a lot easier. But getting them the education around creating a category was significant. It was very successful.
Yeah, and most of it, like we say, was based around originally just around SEO and of course when Google arrived on the scene, because we were there pre-Google, but when Google arrived on the scene, that changed things. Kind of burst into the search engine. I mean, there'd been plenty of search engines before, but Google was certainly the most outstanding among them. And then, of course, you had the arrival of paid search, and then you start to look at this kind of agency business. Talk a little bit about trying to broaden the services that you provide, which is part of a growth strategy anyway. You come from SEO, and now you have to master paid search, and then eventually it's going to be social media and that kind of thing. So from a growth point of view, how do you choose which, how do you broaden out the product portfolio?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So, initially, you're right. We were solely a paid, an organic SEO shop only. I mean, paid search really didn't come about. The first paid search company that came about is, I don't know if you remember, was GoTo.
Mm-hmm.
And then GoTo got bought by Yahoo and rebranded as Overture. And that was in the 2000, 2001 timeframe. So we were already 2 years into building this really successful SEO company. And at first, first when a new thing comes along, you always have to feel it out and see if it's a fad, right? Everyone thought, oh my God, blogs are going to change the world, right? Oh my God, blogs come, and remember that everyone was like, oh, this is absolutely going to change the world for us. It's just another channel. That's all it is,
Yep.
right? So you wanted to see this play out, and one thing that was lost us in the early days, we were so good at SEO. I remember we got one client, the top 29 listings in, there it is. In Lycos on the word car parts. And I'm saying, well, why would clients pay if you could get them all these free listings just by organically optimizing their site? What we failed to realize at the time was clients are inherently lazy, and doing SEO was hard. So what we did realize very quickly was that there was a strong appetite to be able to buy your way to the top of the listings. And so very quickly, we added on the paid search capabilities, and we built some technology along the way to support our ability to manage these bids, because you were spending hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of dollars for your clients, and you had to make multiple bid decisions, 24/7 and manage that. And so, that started to take its own roots and really started to grow. And suddenly, before we knew it, from sort of inception of the company in 98 to 2004, when we sold, like, we were doing double the amount of paid search work as we were doing as SEO. And yet our
Oh,
SEO
yeah.
business was still thriving and growing. It's just the appetite for paid search was endless.
And you still get people even now still saying the same thing, if I can do this organically, why do I need to buy? And, you can go through all of those. Yeah. So with the company is growing organically. And then obviously I assume that you and Frederick had talked about, the future and how you're going to grow did you actually have a formal plan, or was there a lot of good luck as well as good management going on?
We had some plans. I mean, I would lie to tell you that we had this master plan, because a lot of what we were doing was responding to that's a good way to put it. But a lot of it was responding to inbound demand, right? We had a lot of inbound demand around SEO. We had a burgeoning demand for paid search. We were trying to manage investing in technology to help that. And so it was, and all the while we never took any investment. We were funding this by ourselves. And so we had to be very smart and prudent with our investments against our revenue stream, because we could have easily overspent our cash flow position and been in a really bad spot. And so a lot of it was being nimble, was being reactive at the time. And there was funny, I had this one guy come into our office one day, and he's like, well, Frederick, first you guys got to take your A round. I'm like, well, what for? And they're like, well, once you take your A round, then that'll set you up for your B round. I'm like, well, what did I take my A round for that I need my B round? They goes, well, then that'll really tee you up for a great C round. I'm like, but wait a minute. I still don't understand why I had to take the first round, and you're already telling me I need a C round. I said, it's not like there's any competitors that we would want to go out and buy, and we have enough cash flow to continue to support the business and grow. And so, taking money at that time, there was no real compelling reason because we were profitable, we were growing, and we had the cash flow to continue to invest in the business.
So that's an interesting point. I want to come back to financing a little later on in the conversation when we, get to talk about when is it right to take the money in, when do you just stay on the organic side. But I want to just talk about the agency model for a second, because given that we've talked about the fact that there was no category, then, the agency model that evolved was kind of just based on creative agencies and, strategy companies, those kind of things that had existed before. But this is an entirely different kind of area of business to be in. And one of the strengths that I discovered, and in fact, it was when I was talking to a major client that iProspect was working with back then, a little company called Disney, you may remember. And I remember having a conversation with the client and them explaining to us that, working with iProspect was important because they were learning a lot about the industry and search. And it's a very complex kind of thing. So they needed somebody to help guide them. But the one thing that stuck out in my mind more than anything else was the fact that they said, and from a financial point of view, in terms of stability, they're in a good place financially to be able to handle the account. And for me, that was really important, because what they were saying is, we don't know really how good, bad, or indifferent you are at doing this, because we don't fully understand it, but you really know how to handle a major client like Disney. So again, in terms of the way that you were shaping the agency internally, what were you thinking about then? Because you couldn't just bring in an expert, because there weren't experts around. Everybody was just finding their own way.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it was, and I know we'll probably get into the people aspect of it, but it always comes back to was creating a model, right? We created a model on how we could staff business successfully. We built processes and systems for people to follow. So we brought new people in, we would train them and give them the playbooks, for better or worse, to follow, so that we could replicate success. And so a big part of it was, finding the right people, enabling them with the right, playbooks and information, and then setting up the right structure and adding an element of professionalism. Back in the day, I mean, if you remember back in those early days, SES, I mean, people would walk around in bikinis and they would have, Martian costumes, and then there we were, the nerds in suits and ties, but the reality
As you remembering the bikinis and the Martians.
oh my God, it was crazy. But like, we added an element of professionalism to an industry and a segment that didn't have any at the time. And so there was, there's an old adage, right? You never get fired for hiring IBM. There was a little bit of that, in that we had to establish a presence, a level of professionalism. When you dealt with a Disney or P&G, they wanted to know that you had enough cash on hand, so you'd have to verify your financials and things like that. And so our ability to, and we weren't even a big company. I mean, I guess our ability to cast a bigger shadow than we were, because we had the right systems and processes, and we operated with a level of professionalism, gave people a peace of mind. Right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly iProspect was, as a brand, and Frederick, and it's worth talking a little bit more about Frederick, because he was kind of a visionary back then, and what he did with you and the rest of the senior team then, and I was kind of just riding on the coattails of that, which was great. But to eventually sell the company for $50 million, he knew where he had to make it shine. So you are right. I mean, I was with SES from the very beginning and ended up running the show for quite some time, as you know.
It was better when you were in it.
It was much more fun, absolutely. But no, seriously, people would say to me, who are all the guys in the blue suits? It looks like IBM. And I was like, that's working. That's definitely working. However, you did for a while, I do remember, you did for a while have this kind of cave in the expo hall, which was your prospecting cave.
Yes, it was our prospect
Mine.
cave. Yes, if you go back to our early days, and if you Google I prospect early days, we had a CMO, Bill Muller, and he really picked up on the I prospecting was prospecting. We were prospecting for
Yep.
customers, right? And so we had the whole concept was that booth was a mine, and we had like a wheeler, like an old cart, and a lot of our advertising had like these hands uh, with a pot of gold, like a mining pot, and you had gold in the pan, and we used to give
Mhm.
out the gum. Remember the old stale gum
I do, yeah.
oh my God, yeah. But I mean, that was all about establishing a brand and a presence early stages when in a category which was still burgeoning. So, all of that was just, just part and parcel to kind of putting our stake in the ground of who we were and how we wanted to be seen and represented and what we wanted to stand for. And so, history says that, we made more right choices than wrong choices, but you know what? We made our fair share of wrong choices.
Absolutely, but I think the notion of building a brand, it's one thing to have a company and provide services and be professional, but in terms of building the brand and projecting that kind of image, I think that did a real great service to iProspect, and was one of the reasons that they were able to knock on the doors of these much larger enterprise level companies, because you were dealing with when I first came on board, like I say, there was Disney, there was Bank of America, there was P&G, these were all huge names, so I think building the brand in terms of part of your growth strategy is vitally important, that it does, that it does represent and that people can recognize it, and know and understand from just the way that the brand projects itself what the value is behind that particular brand.
Yeah, and I know you wrote the first book. I think we might have wrote the second, but we wrote a book. We did a lot of speaking and writing on the topic. We did a lot of early stage education to people around or in the early days it was organic SEO, but then obviously it migrated into paid search as well. But just trying to establish that, because back in the day, then for those of you who were you know practicing back then. I mean, we were the kids at the little table, even though as important as paid search was back then. We were at the little table. We got the little budgets. There were still the big creatives and the brand shops. They got the big money, right? The TV budgets. And then there was this after, oh, we got to throw some money at search. And so we had to make do with the table scraps. But you know what? For the bigger brands, the table scraps were, sizable budgets, and we were able to build a great brand on it. But fast forward to today, I mean, what, 68% of all budgets now are digitally led. That's upside down from what it was 25 years
Yeah.
ago.
This is, without going too far of a tangent, it's kind of a little thing that I've been around more than anything else that I've had for a while. Because certainly back in the day, people would look at search and they would like, it's like a below the line, it's not above the line. And most of my money is on a media spend, which is above the line kind of thing. And like you say, trying to get to that was a very difficult thing. And, the scraps on the table, like for iProspect, when you're working with a larger company, like a Bank of America or a Disney, then like you said, the scraps are pretty big, but nowhere near. And I still hear people talking about we have this much money for media, blah, and then we have this much money for digital. And I go, I don't even know why we call this digital marketing, and there is no other kind.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who says in the morning, wakes up and says, I'm going to do some analog marketing today. There's no such thing. We're marketing in a digital world. And I wish that people would just think about it that way. In fact, one of the challenges, and I've done this a few times with clients with larger companies, it's a nightmare to think about it. But if you were to take your budget now, set it back to zero, I mean, literally set it back to zero and start again, it would all be digital. It would look like an entirely different thing. And across the organization, you wouldn't have all of these silos where that money belongs over there and he controls this budget. Anyway, that's a separate thing. So just going back to growth, the brand is important. We kind of touched on finance before. So again, when people are thinking about growing, either there's an area of the business that will attract more business if you put more money into it. So you kind of touched on it before. When do you have the requirement to think about, can I do this organically, or is now the time that I should be asking for the bank to support me better? Do I need a better overdraft? Do I need to go and get some private equity?
Yeah, I mean, some of it, I think some of that is category dependent, right? And I think what we've seen is, you're familiar with Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, right? Every technology that comes out gets half the time as the one before, and
Yep.
so you have such limited windows. So technologies that are being invented today usually get 2 years to mature, where I think search probably got like 5 or 6 years to mature. Everything is happening quicker. So in our category, we were afforded the time to be able to build it right and not have to rush. And there really weren't a lot of sizable competitors in the early 2000s. There was Performix. That was the first one to get bought out.
Oh yeah.
And then there was
Chicago.
and then there was iCrossing. And then after that, there was, I think Kevin Leon did it. And I mean, but the number of competitors started to tail off there. And so the category was growing so fast and all of us were growing so organically fast that there wasn't necessarily a need for us to make acquisitions, like to acquire each other or to try and acquire something different. For you, it was different because that was international expansion, which was totally a different ballgame for us. But within the U.S. marketplace, we had a profitable model. We had great clients that paid on time, which was huge because we launched, the year before 2001 when the market crashed, and we lost a lot of clients, and we could have been in real big trouble if we didn't have really great clients that paid us on time. But in that time frame, in that category at that time, there wasn't this huge need. I mean, if you had taken money, what would you have done with it? You either would have bought someone, invested in sales and marketing, which we were already able to do, and then the question was the category ready for that? Like if you had gone out and bought a Super Bowl ad, was the category ready for that? It wasn't. Flash forward to today, I'm not saying Super Bowl ads, but new technologies today just aren't afforded the same amount of time to mature that they were in the past. And I think that's going to lead to some technologies probably coming and going to the wayside that were probably great technologies just ahead of their time.
So obviously we're focused a lot on iProspect because those were really exciting times, and to sell a company for $50 million back then. But when what actually happened there? Was there a decision with you and Frederick, about we're going to grow the company to a particular size and that's it, will be acquired, and then we'll just go and sit on the beach and drink cocktails all day, or did somebody come knocking on the door? And
that's what like I got stuck running the thing. So no, one thing that I did preach early on, and again, this was just part of my bend about really having a level of professionalism, having the right systems and processes. These are probably things I did learn from Bain and the work I'd done, was that, and especially all the pressure for people to take money when you didn't need it. And that's a lesson in life you'll all learn. People are ready to give you money all the time and you don't need it. And the minute you need it, no one will give it to you. But I always said that, look, if you build something to sell it, no one's ever going to want to buy it. What you want to build is you want to build something you plan to own for 100 years. And if you do that, there's going to be a greater chance that someone's going to come along and say, I really appreciate what you built. I'd like you to become part of a bigger thing. And so we never set out, there was never a plan where 2004 was going to be the year. We just built a great company. We just did the right things. We tried to stick to our values, make smart decisions, be consistent, be clear, and just keep growing and doing what we know is right. And then who knows, something may give, and and the tides may turn, and those tides turned in 2004, because that was the first year that I think Performix got sold early that year. Um, and the phone just started ringing. We just started getting calls from bankers and strategics. And then, we were approached by one company individually, and we went to the board and said, guys, like, we can just keep fielding calls one by one, or we can actually go and hire a banker and understand what the real value of this company is, because we keep getting a lot of inbound calls. So again, I'd like to say that there was, we made this master plan that we're going to sell in 5 years. We're going to sell, and it wasn't that way. We're not Nostradamus. It was just, we built a great company, and the category got to a point where people started to take notice that, geez, this digital marketing thing, they might be onto something. And there was a lot of the big, there's a lot of big traditional agency companies that are like, we might want to start getting in on this digital thing. And so we hired a banker, and we went to process, and we ended up getting 5 bids for the company. And in typical process, you go back out, and I want to say 3 of the 5 up their bid. And at the end of the day, we ended up picking Aegis for a number of reasons. They were one of the first ones to approach us, but we liked that they didn't have a lot of digital. We were going to be a very big piece of the pie in their world around digital, and we were going to be given the ability to continue to run as we see fit, because it wasn't like they had any preconceived notion about what digital was, or had a lot of, wasn't like there was a lot of existing assets that we were going to have to bump into. So we thought our ability to continue to do the things the way we want to do them was best set by joining up with Aegis. And so we did that, and it was a fantastic merger.
I think sorry for interrupting, but I think at that time you did actually have kind of a relationship with Aegis, with
Yeah,
one of their other agencies, providing such.
we did. We had some relationships with Cara, their sister, one of their media buying agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we knew some people there. But I did think culturally it was a good fit for us, which is really, really important. I mean, I cannot underestimate the value of culture when you sell your agency, unless you really are just going to sell it and walk away. Like, the people you're doing business with, you've got to make sure you share some common values and visions, and that you truly are going to be given the reins to do things the way you want to do them, versus going into the mothership, and the mothership basically changing everything you do overnight, which happens. And so, it was a great merger. And I will say this, they paid $50 million for us, but I built the world's largest digital performance agency network in the world, with their support. So I'd argue they got well worth their $50 million.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's the next important thing. So taking the next step in your career, because obviously you'd helped, with Frederick achieve that incredible thing, and that acquisition. But then it just went crazy after that. The brand just grew like incredible. So I think maybe with Aegis, part of the plan was the international growth, growth by, geographical.
Well, that came after a while. It's funny. In the first couple of years, we were in earnout, so we pretty much just continued to get to focus on the U.S. marketplace. And they had gone out and bought a bunch of assets around the world, digital assets in other countries. It wasn't until because Frederick had now gone, so I had built the U.S. business to probably about $100 million in revenue, and we were very profitable, most profitable company that Aegis owned. And they had all these different brands around the world, and they went through a brand rationalization process, much like a lot of these agencies are doing today, right? These guys just did it, 15 years ago. And they wanted to take all these brands and rationalize them down to a couple. And so they picked 5 core brands: Cara, which was a pre-existing; Visium, which was a pre-existing; Poster Scope. They created a new brand for all things creative called Isobar, and then they chose iProspect to be their masthead brand for all things digital performance. And so the decision was made to then rebrand all the digital marketing agencies around the globe under the iProspect masthead, which was a challenge in and of itself, in that we had to go around and basically teach everybody how to go to market and brand themselves as iProspect. And then we had to build common pricing models and delivery models and reporting models, because like Nokia, when we did paid search for them around the world, they wanted one strategy executed around the world with the same set of billing, and the same, methodologies, procedures, reporting. They wanted consistency around the world around one strategy, and then a central billing situation. And that's hard. But that was a very tall task. But I give Aegis a lot of credit in really having the willingness to do that, because we had to convince a lot of people to let go of their brands.
Yeah, I actually do remember because when I was running SES, obviously we took that international, particularly in Asia. So we were doing shows in Singapore and Hong Kong, and I actually remember when we were doing the first show in China, and I was in Beijing, and I went to the iProspect office in Beijing. And man, it was like a palatial place. And I was sitting there and I was feeling so proud. And then I was trying to explain what my connection was with iProspect, apart from a bit of the language barrier thing. It was like, yeah, whatever, we're the biggest. So that's where you learned a lot. You brought a lot to iProspect as a small company growing it. Obviously, you learned a great deal as well, working with Aegis, working with a larger, enterprise global organization. So what was the next step? What did you do after that? I mean,
well, the biggest thing then was to actually, it was not I'd like to say it was, the decision was easy. The execution was, I had to create global steering committees from both EMEA and APAC, and then go around and actually spend a lot of time with a lot of folks to actually, really, to build a seamless brand around the world was not an easy exercise. And there was a lot of, egos. People had built brands and sold brands, and they had affinity to their brands. And I said, look, we're all going to succeed better in this world if we could all get behind one single brand and promote that brand globally. But I said, look, the way you look at this is 70% of what you eat is what you kill locally. And then 30% is what you'll get from the network. And then if you just assume that you're still 70% of the work is what you do, you're selling to local companies and being able to deliver and deliver and do what you do at a local level to whether you're in France or Germany or Poland or Netherlands or wherever. I said, but then the other 30 will be filled in by network brands like Nokia and GM, where you will be asked to be part of a global seamless team of delivery that delivers around a central global client. And it worked. Truth be told, it was a successful strategy, very much at the time. And that probably took us to the 2013 timeframe when Dentsu came in and bought Aegis. And that's actually when I chose. That was my sort of time. I'd been at iProspect for 14 and a half years. And I spent 9 years learning the British way. And I thought, you know what? I thought, now I'm going to have to learn the Japanese way. And I thought, now is as good a time as any. And so that was a great point in my career to say, you know what? I've done everything I can do, and it's time for someone else to take the reins.
I remember your very first trip to London when we got together there, when we opened the London office way back in 2002 or 3. Here's the thing, it just strikes a chord with me that I know a lot about the industry because I've been around for a while, and then, being publisher of two of the largest titles. And you see what's going on in the industry. And I've seen many companies, there have been a lot of acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions go on. And one of the things that I think people do have a fear of is, you kind of just touched on it there, is if my company gets acquired, what are we going to do to build the brand and kind of do an iProspect? When there's also the fear that, and it happens quite a lot, that the company gets acquired and it disappears into a corporate black hole, and nobody ever hears of that brand again. Like you said before, there might be some people who just want to sell the company and go and sit on the beach, but there are those who actually want to participate like you do in turning it into something much larger. I mean, is there anything that you can tell, when you're having these conversations with a potential, somebody who wants to acquire the company, whether they're going to keep the brand, help you grow it, or what do they have to bring to the table?
Well, I mean, certainly you want to understand what their vision and strategy is, because if they can't present a codified vision or strategy, then you have to wonder what their real plan is and whether you want to join forces with someone that doesn't have a plan. Secondarily, look at what they've done with the other companies they've acquired. Talk to those folks. Talk to the founders of the other companies that they've acquired and see what they're, not just the ones that have been around for 6 months, be the ones that have been around for a couple of years, because that's when you really, you kind of see when things take hold. People are always willing to give you sort of, 6, 12 months to kind of run things on your own, and then things start to creep in. If really maintaining your independence is an important thing, then you really want to really dig in hard and talk to other people that have been part of this and see, how true they are. Because everyone's going to tell you they're going to leave you alone. Everyone's going to tell you that. It's what happens, 2 years after that statement, and how they really honor their word that, you need to do some digging and understand, how true will that statement be.
So you went with a startup, a content marketing agency called
Skyward.
Skyward, yeah. So you've had all of this huge experience. My guess is that a startup company like that, which I assume was well funded at the very beginning, would absolutely want to have somebody like Rob Murray come on board and, can you do the same thing for us that you did for iProspect? Is that the deal?
Yeah, I will say that. So I've worked for 3 companies for the past 25 years, and 2 of the 3, that statement held true. There was one, the one in between, which was Skyward, which was not well funded. It was okay funded, and it was a pivot. And I learned a lot in my life around what does it mean to be part of a pivot, and what does that mean for your fundraising. And so that company was just a pivot out of another company. And we did great work, and that company still is here today. And I spent 5 years as part of that company, and I had great times and great friendships and great memories. But after 5 years, that company, just the legacy of being a pivot and what it does to drag down your cap table and rip fundraising and all that, it was just, I had never been part of that because we never took money as iProspect. And so that was a very much a life lesson for me, is the difficulty in fundraising and what a distraction it is, and all of that. And so after a while, that really kind of wore me down, because I just like to get in and grow companies. And so, my current company was a company I joined back in 2019 called 3Q Digital, and it was born out of Silicon Valley. And the founder there knew me from periods of time. And he said that same thing. He's like, I've taken this thing as far as I can take it. He's like, I want to leave this asset in good hands. And I want someone to be able to build a $250 million company. And he's like, and he's just looking around. He goes, you're the one I know who's done it. So could you do that for me? And so I was very fortunate to join that company. And I've been here 5 years now. And it's been a great experience. And we actually sold to a Dutch-based company 2 years ago.
Yep.
And actually,
I'm going to come back to that in a second, but it's interesting when you say, when you go with a smaller company and you go for the funding, and you kind of touched on it earlier on as well, when I was saying that you have to figure out when is the time that I go and ask for some more money, or that I bring somebody in and there's equity and I have to give somebody else a bit of the business. When I have to make all of those decisions, my father said to me, he was a businessman, and when I was a kid, I vividly remember him saying something along those lines. When it's a sunny day, the bank will always lend you an umbrella, but when it rains, they want it back.
Yeah, exactly. And I learned that more at Skyward than anywhere, because like, we got funding early on. And it's just, when you get to a point where funding is tight, the money dries up very quickly. Everyone's willing to loan you money when you don't need it. And then the question you have to ask yourself is, Do I take it for a rainy day fund? Do I take it and invest it, or do I not take it at all? Because money comes with strings attached. It always does, and you just have to understand what those strings are, and you have to understand it. Is it worth? Are the strings attached worth taking the money, and what I can do with it, and what does that mean for the value of my company? And so yeah, no, Mike, the umbrella analogy is a very true one.
Yeah, yeah. So we've still got a few minutes left before we'll see if there's a few questions to come in here. But imagine you had a time machine and you can now go back to that fledgling company, which I think was above a bank in Boston. That's where when I first
Arlington, Massachusetts. It was on the corner of Mass Ave and Route 60, behind that old bank. And our server room was the old safe, which
exactly, yeah.
which I don't think is always the smartest idea, because it got really hot in there. I mean, most people would argue don't put your server room in a safe, but that's kind of at the time.
So if you had the time machine, you wouldn't put the server room in the safe.
I would not put the server room in the old safe.
I mean, generally speaking, when you think about this great experience that you've had leading up to the more recent acquisition, so you've been around the block a few times. If you were to go back, are there any key moments, any key, areas that you would say, well, I wouldn't do that again, or I definitely would do this,
So I mean, the decision to partner with Frederick Cross was a no-brainer to me. We did some great things. We invested in technology, and this is a very interesting thing for agencies. I've been part of every agency I've ever been part of has built some amount of technology. And I think the challenge with technology is it has to be built with specific purpose in mind, and it has to make your team more effective and more efficient. It has to be something the client will log into and can't live without. It has to have a defined reason, and then you have to validate that through adoption and usage and all that. We built a bid agent, one of the first bid agents, back in 2001, 2002 timeframe.
Oh, I remember it well. Yeah.
ICEBA. And we organically invested in it, but I half wonder, and when we bought it from Aegis, they tried to spin it out and invest in it, but I half wonder if we had been able to spin that company out onto its own, because remember, there was the services world that we lived in, and then there was the technology world that people were playing in. Who were some of those early stage bid management companies?
Go Toast.
Yes, Go Toast and all. I have to wonder if we couldn't have spun out the tech company and funded it on its own to see if that could have had its own life. Technology inside of an agency, it's really hard because you're never going to license it to another agency, and it's really only meant for your staff. So that thing, that technology could never see the light of day inside of an agency. And I wish we could have seen what it could have happened had we spun it out.
So that's a kind of interesting thing, because I've been in that same situation a few times. And from a marketing point of view, I think there is some confusion sometimes with the client when you're building all of this technology, to become more efficient and, those kind of things. And then people look at you and they go, are you a marketing company or are you a technology company? And then, like you say, no other agency, you can't license it to another agency because of the competitive element. And then you end up, and I'm just going to be frank here, because again, having been around for as long as I have, every client that I speak to, and then you start and talk about your technology, they go, yeah, you have a black box and it's better than the other guy's black box.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you have to be very clear around your goals for technology and how you invest in it, because there's a hidden cost in keeping technology afloat that is separate from developing new functionality, right? So you'll have a roadmap where you'll have a whole list of tech debt. You'll have a whole list of tickets that need to get fixed of things that just aren't working with the core product. And then you have a whole list of things you want to add. And before you know it, could have a very large team and a very large expense into a technology team. And that's why it's always a struggle for agencies to be really effective at building technology, because at the end of the day, they get the bulk of their revenues are derived from their services. So the technology has to be very specific around what it does and how you're leveraging it. Or can you find it? Can you just buy it off the shelf? Because sometimes buying it off the shelf is the better way to go.
Exactly. And that brings us to this final thing before we see if there are a few questions here. Obviously, like everybody else, you can see these dramatic changes that are taking place with technology, AI, machine learning. generative, and people are wondering, how is the industry going to change? I mean, it's kind of history repeats itself, because with the World Wide Web, and like you say, there was no category, and then you had to create it and become a part of that. But given that you've gone through that iteration and many others, if you were in a kind of a startup situation right now, or in that area where we really have an opportunity to grow, build a brand of great value, then do you have to lean more towards the technology? How do you see the industry changing, and then agencies adapting to it?
Well, I mean, first of all, anytime you look to invest or start with a company, you want to look at the landscape and what's transpiring right there, and what technologies may or not be disrupting things. Right now, AI is disrupting our world as we see it, and certainly there's a case to be made that investing in AI in a way to make a process or system or something more efficient. I'm not going to say AI, like even with creative, AI isn't going to make is client ready creative. It's going to get you 60% of the way there, and human element can touch it up. But if you're eliminating 60% of the cost of getting you to that point, there's real efficiency gains there. So you're talking about time to market, speed to market, efficiency, effectiveness, right? All of those are ways, if you could find a way to use AI technology to disrupt a certain category or a process or a system, to make things better, faster, more efficient, I think there's real play there. And so that is certainly one, as I look at the environment today, that would be a way to, a way I would look to invest. But the other way is like, I'm a 25-year service guy. I've always been in the services industry. But I will say technology scales a lot quicker. And if you could find your way into developing a technology that is seamless to use, if you think about how many technology companies have been built, and people call them SaaS or all that stuff, really they end up having these large services bureaus to actually help manage the software, because the client doesn't want to log in and doesn't have anyone on their staff that knows the software well enough. There's only truly a few softwares that are truly self-service. Microsoft Office, Google Suite, and like maybe Salesforce, because everybody needs it and they're going to have their team do it. But like most technology, you end up needing someone to be an operator of it. And most brands are pretty lazy. But if you could build a truly self-service piece of software, I mean, I think that's the hidden gem right there.
I think that's true. I think a lot of the SaaS companies out there are supposed to be, as a software as a service. But like you say, you end up with this next level down, a team of support people and, client success, as they're called. That's service
as
actually.
a software. They become service as a software.
Exactly. This is so good. We've still got a few minutes left. I'm going to just quickly check, because I don't quite know how we do this. I forgot to ask.
There was some questions I saw. Someone had asked a question. I don't know
how do we see the questions?
Okay, you have to single out one greatest correspondence. Okay, Doc, that is a great question. I'll answer it in two ways. I mean, first and foremost, don't get out over your skis. Like, especially as a small agency, you really have to be. Someone once told me, be great at one thing and someone will pay you for that one great thing. Try to be great things at all things and people won't value that, right? It's really hard to be great at all. And what do they go? Jack of all, master none.
Yeah.
Be really great at one thing that people will value and pay you for. Don't get over your skis. Don't try and diversify your product sets sooner than you're capable of delivering on, or to outrun your cash flow. So, I mean, as a small agency, if you're self-funding yourself, cash flow is king, and it's very quickly, it is easy to find yourself in financial troubles. And so making sure that you're able to maintain your profitability and your cash flow against your investments and how you're realizing them is very critical. And that's where I think brands will, small agencies always think that, let me chase the dollars. Oh, the client will pay me to do this. And then the client will pay me to do this. And then the client, that's great. But the only way you really make money is by creating a process or a system and a product and delivering that repeatedly so that every time you do it more efficiently and make more money doing it
So
versus
I think,
trying to be everything to one person. So just
yeah,
stick to what you're good at and just do that one thing and just
I
make
think
sure there's a market for it.
it comes back to that one word, scale.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to scale. And I think one of the problems that small agencies have, and I do help, wherever I can, within the industry. And it is very difficult as a small agency with big ideas and wanting to grow. You just don't know how to say no. So learning how to say no sometimes instead of taking everything on, because then when you can't deliver, when you can't really scale and, get the product out there, then that's a big problem.
That's a great point, Mike. I mean, the times you say no are sometimes more critical than the times you say yes, because the clients will ask you, "Can you do this?" And the question is, "Could you?" Yeah. Can you do it, seamlessly? Can you build a repeatable process around it, or is this a one-off?
Somebody once used an example. I can't remember who it is, but for those of us in the industry who understand a little bit of the technology, he said scale, if you want to know how it really works, it's like a JPEG. If you take a JPEG image and try and make it bigger,
Yeah.
it just gets distorted and looks terrible. But if you
Yep.
take a vector graphic and pull it out, it just remains the same. So if you're thinking about scale, don't be a JPEG, be a vector graphic. Strange thing, but
Sounds like a T-shirt, Mike. Don't be a JPEG.
don't be a JPEG. Exactly. I don't know. Do you have any more questions? Let me just check in the bank and see if anybody else has anything else they want to ask you.
Oh, hey, Michael, how you doing?
Oh, it's Michael Bonfils.
Yeah.
Michael.
What's the video before? Sorry. Yeah. Oh, great question, Michael. Yeah. I mean, certainly, one area that I'm certainly seeing within our client bases is evolving. I mean, it's all put under the umbrella of programmatic because you can buy so much media now programmatically. But certainly video is a big part of it. Video, I mean, we're buying video out of home. I mean, there's some really great ways of leveraging programmatically bought media, both digital and out of home, in a way that I think could be another bastion there where you could there could be a play there. We're starting to see it with some of our clients, some of our retail-based clients where they do store openings and we're doing, geofencing. We're doing geofencing, digital targeting, as well as digital out of home around the store openings and stuff like that. There's some neat plays there, but I mean, certainly video, any form of video is certainly something I would get behind 100% because there's an increasing appetite for that.
Absolutely. And I think streaming is the answer. That, I mean, all ad is going to be streaming anyway, for the future. So certainly from a programmatic point of view. We have 2 minutes. If there's one more question, we can do that. This is great stuff, by the way, Rob. I'm so glad we had a
No,
chance
it's
to do
awesome.
this.
We just got to do this. we just got to do this once every 9 years, Mike.
Exactly. Yeah. Just as a catch up. Actually, next time you're in the city, we're due a proper catch up in town. Looks like we don't. Oh, no, we don't have any more.
Welcome, Doc.
Shelton's with us as well. Hey there, Doc. Yeah. So, and thanks to Michael and Doc for the questions there. Thank you, Rob. Again, I mean, this is great. A lot to learn, and certainly we could have done this for 2 more hours. So maybe we'll come back and do round 2. But for today, thank you so much, Rob, and thanks to everybody for joining us. And we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Be well.
Does your SaaS company offer websites? It's time to level up your customers'